building spirituality, family, health, and business. This is the Giant Builders with Lois Chart.
Welcome, Giant Builders. My guest today is Melissa Wright, and she is a human design expert. And we might share my human design chart with you. We'll see how it goes. But hey, Melissa, how are you?
I'm great, Lois. Thanks for having me. I'm definitely excited to have this opportunity to share human design with you and with your podcast audience for sure.
Well, thank you. Let's start off. Can you tell me a little bit more about human design?
Okay, so human design basically, and sometimes it can be challenging for me to figure out how to explain it without showing it, because it definitely does help to see the visual. But basically, human design works on the 9 energy centers that we all have. So it starts from the premise that everything is energy, right? We're energy, everything around us is energy. And it also works on the different aura types. So in human design, there's 4 different aura types. And like the aura is that thing that you feel when someone walks into the room and it just changes the whole mood of the room. That's what you're feeling. You're feeling their aura. So human design shows us which of the 4 aura types you have, which gives you a lot of information on how you're actually designed to interact with other people. And the truth is that most of us are not actually living or working or like being out in the world in a way that's in alignment with our design, because we've kind of taken on a lot of pressure from the people around us our whole entire lives, starting with our parents and maybe siblings and teachers and friends and all of the people that we've been around, where we've kind of taken on this belief that there's something wrong with us, that we're not enough, that we need to do something else so that we can be loved, so that we can fit in, or all of those other things that we do to make us feel like we're not enough, that we spend our whole lives trying to compensate for, that then attracts situations that, maybe aren't very pleasant, or maybe even create trauma in our lives that then we spend our whole adult lives trying to heal from. And so human design shows us how we're meant to interact with people, how we're meant to make correct decisions. So our body has a different way of telling us what to say yes to and what to say no to, if we understand and we allow ourselves to connect with it. But really, most of us have a really active mind. And I don't know, I know you said you weren't really familiar with the 7 chakras, and that's perfectly okay. But most people have heard of the 7 chakras. That's what Reiki, if you've ever heard of Reiki, is based on the 7 chakras. A lot of yoga practices focus on the 7 chakras. And most people are still operating their life like they're a 7 chakra being. But human design actually believes we evolved from 7 chakras to 9 in 1781. And really the big thing that happened with that evolution is when we were 7-centered, our mind was the best tool we had for making decisions, for knowing what's correct, what to say yes to, what path to take in our life. And our mind is kind of like that politician that wants to do or say whatever it needs to do or say to stay in power. So our minds tend to be really loud. I don't know, Lois, do you have a really loud, active mind?
When I'm trying to sleep, I do.
Yeah. And there's this big conditioning force in the world too, to do what's logical, right? Like what makes sense, to have the facts to back it up. And we want to do the research and do the logical thing, the thing that feels responsible, or, the thing that everybody says, like, this is how you grow your business, and this is how you have success. And, this is how you market your business, and all of those things. And that's where the mind comes in. And the mind can be really loud, but none of us are designed to use the mind to know that, to find our best path, to know what to say yes to, what to say no to, and to help us find that path that helps us to live out our life purpose. So now that we have 9 energy centers, and I know it'd be easier to understand if you could see a chart right now, but hopefully what I'm saying.
You want to pull up my chart?
You can pull it up for sure.
Okay. If that helps, that would be great.
Sometimes it helps to have the visual.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is Lois's chart, and you can see we have these 9 energy centers. Some of them are white and some of them are colored. And so the ones that are white, this is where we're going to absorb energy from other people. So as people come into your aura, we talked a little bit about aura, and your aura is like 15 feet in all directions. So 15 feet, 360 degrees. When someone comes in your aura, you're going to absorb energy from that person, especially through your white centers. And you have 5 of the 9 that are white. So as people come in, you're going to experience their energy and the way that they process it and understand it, especially if they're colored where you're white. And then the centers where you're colored, this is where people are most likely to absorb your energy, if that kind of makes sense. But so we look at this chart, and it, like I said, it tells us how our body is designed to tell us what's correct or what's not correct. So for Lois, that information is going to come from her solar plexus, which is the brown one on the side over here. And so her body is going to generate emotional waves, because this is our emotional awareness center. And so she's going to know what's correct only when she's allowed that emotional wave to complete and looked back after the wave is completed to all of the thoughts and perspectives that were available on all those parts of the emotional wave. And then, a lot of times people will tell you, like, if you're trying to decide what to do, you just have to follow your gut. Have you ever had anybody tell you that, Lois, to just follow your gut?
Yes.
Does that feel like it's helpful information to you?
No, it sounds like a cop-out.
It's really interesting because you're actually not designed to follow your gut. So that, like, when people say that, but people who are designed to follow their gut, it's really clear to them, that information that comes from their gut. And so that would be someone who has this one that's brown for you, white, but then has this one that's white for you, the sacral center, it would be red in their chart. And then they would have a sacral authority, which is the gut. It's the gut knowing. And that authority uses yes or no questions and feels for the reaction to that from their gut. So whenever someone tells you to just follow your gut and that makes sense to them, they probably have the sacral authority. Mm-hmm. But 51% of the population has the solar plexus, the emotional authority, like you do. And so yeah, if that has ever felt like a cop out to you and someone said that and you're like, your brain just can't wrap its head around what that means or what that would feel like or how that, it makes perfect sense to me, because that is not how you're designed. But almost everyone would give someone that advice to just follow your gut. And if you don't have a sacral authority, that advice is actually not helpful. And that's a place where it can make you feel, potentially, you can take on the belief that there's something wrong with me because I'm not good at following my gut. And everybody just says, follow your gut. But yeah, you were not meant to follow your gut. And then for me, like, I have both of those white in my chart, and then I have the spleen over here brown. So I have a splenic authority. So I'm also not designed to follow my gut. I'm here to follow my intuition, which is very subtle, and it's really easy for the mind to be louder than the spleen. Like the spleen, so you do have this intuitive knowing too, but so you might get kind of those intuitive hunches, and sometimes you can follow that and it'll work out well. But really, it's important to still remember that your body can only know what to say yes to if you've ridden out and waited for that emotional wave to complete. So you want that after some time. So usually, like, at least sleep on it before you actually decide, to validate what that intuitive hunch was telling you, if that kind of makes sense.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's human design. A human design chart has so much information, and we're really just scratching the surface. But there's just so much information here about how we're naturally designed, how we can identify when it is pressure from one of our white centers that's kind of steering us off our path, that's making it harder for us to listen to our body's wisdom of what to say yes to and what to say no to. Yeah, to really identify when it is a thought that came from someone else's belief or someone else's logic and reason that we've kind of taken on without realizing that it doesn't actually serve us and support us, like something like just follow your gut. Yeah. Any questions about that? I know I just threw a whole bunch at you.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. All right. So I'll stop the share just for now, unless we need to bring it back up. But
okay. So how does human design help us in our relationships?
Yeah, human design definitely can help us in a relationship. One of the things we can do is we can take our chart and someone else's chart, and we can do what's called a connection chart. So it puts the two charts together, and then we can see how the energy dynamics play out between us and the other person. So we can see which centers they're most likely to influence us, where we're going to absorb that energy. And then when we have, let me bring it back up so I can show you and not just tell you. There's different types of connections that happen within a chart. So here you can see that when you have both gates, so the gates are the numbers inside of the centers, and they get activated based on the numbers that are in the squares on the right side and the left side. So you'll see some of the lines in there are red and some of them are black. So the ones that are black, you're going to find those numbers on the black side, and the ones that are red, you'll find them on the red side. And then you'll see you also have some that have both black and red. So when those gates get activated in our chart, and these correspond with the different astrological bodies. We have the sun, we have the earth. These are the nodes, the north node, the south node, the moon, and then all of the planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. So based on the positioning of all those astrological bodies at the time that you're born, it activates certain traits in your design. So we have a personality crystal that comes into our body when we're born. And then this red side comes from 88 days before. We have a design crystal that comes into our body based on the positioning at that moment in time that gets calculated. And so the traits that are red, they tend to be a little bit more unconscious. And then the traits that are black, these are our personality. This is who we think we are. So we're more likely to resonate with those traits. When both gates on either side of the line in between the two centers are activated or colored, it doesn't matter if they're red or black or a combination, that's a channel that we have. And that tells us our natural gifts and strengths. And especially for us as projectors, you're a projector and I'm a projector as well. We are here to be acknowledged and recognized and invited for those channels that we have activated, because those are our natural gifts and strengths. So our success will come from when people recognize and acknowledge our natural gifts and strengths. But anyway, that's just a whole nother tangent. But so when we only have half of a line that's activated and the other half is open, that's called a hanging gate. And so we're unconsciously energetically looking for other people that have the other half of our hanging gate. And that's called an electromagnetic channel. And that's where attraction happens. So when you meet someone and automatically you feel drawn to them before they've even said a word, that's what's happening. It's that electromagnetic connection that's happening that we feel energetically. Does that kind of make sense?
Okay, yeah.
Okay. So then the other type of connection we can have is when one person has the full line and the other person only has half. That's a compromise channel. So energetically, the person that has the full line colored, their energy is going to compromise or supersede the other person's energy. And so for the person that only has half, that can feel uncomfortable or unpleasant. And that's usually where we see conflict in relationships. Mm-hmm. Especially when we aren't aware that that's what's happening at the energetic level. And that's when in a relationship, we would say like, oh, if you love me enough, you'd stop doing that. Like I told you, I don't like it when you do that, but you keep doing it. If you love me more, you wouldn't do it. But really, energetically, it's not like we have a choice. It's not a behavior we do. It's just how it happens at the energetic level. And so when we recognize that that's what's coming into play, it's that compromise energy. And then we can stop taking it personally. So, and really, it's not something that can change in our relationship. We have to decide either that we are willing to accept it and stop taking it personally and just see that that's just who that person is, or we decide we can't live with it and we end the relationship.
So if we know these things about, say, our spouse or our children, how does that help us with how we help them align with their design?
Yeah. So, and it comes into play when we recognize how we're different. So let's say like you're married to someone that has that sacral authority. And for them, they do make quick in the moment decisions, and it's really clear, it's really cut and dry, and they just know. And then you can support them by asking them yes or no questions. So if you are married to someone that's sacral and you ask them an open-ended question, like, where do you want to go to eat? their body can't respond to that open-ended question. But if you say, hey, do you want to go have Italian tonight? Their body can be like, oh yeah, that's what I want. Or no, oh no, I can't do Italian. Then we can support them in their body's decision-making process and their way of accessing their body's truth. And then too, like, let's say you have a spouse who's sacral and you're emotional like you are. Now they can understand why you can't make that in the moment decision, why you never really seem to be sure. And in their mind, it's not hard. You access your gut and you just know. And then they can understand finally that that's why it seems like you can't ever make a decision, or that you kind of go back and forth and like you seem indecisive. And so when we understand how we're different through understanding the other person's chart, it just brings so much more understanding and grace and ease, and we can really work in harmony as opposed to taking things personally. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And when it comes to kids, it's so huge. Like there are levels of human design that we can't see in this software. That is where I tend to start when it comes to kids, because it tells us how we're designed to eat, where we're designed to live, what our motivation is, our viewer perspective, the way that we see the world, which most of us as adults have been so conditioned. The first place we get conditioned out of living in alignment with is how we eat. But if we can support our kids to eat the way they're designed and live in an environment that they're naturally designed to do well, then they're less likely to take on conditioning through their white centers. So it's not the first place we start with adults, but it is the first place we start with kids. Because if we can support our kids to live in alignment with their design and never take on that belief that they're not enough or that they have these weaknesses they need to compensate for, and they can just honor their natural gifts and strengths and the traits that make them who they are, and they can trust themselves and their way of making decisions and knowing what's correct for them or not. Usually, most importantly, what's not, right? Like when we get good at saying no to things that are not correct from us, instead of falling into the patterns of people pleasing and making everyone else happy, then they actually get to live a life that feels satisfying or fulfilling or successful for them, and whatever that looks like. But yeah, so
when you say like how to eat, are you referring to the fact of the types of food you should eat, or are you referring?
Some of them do give more specific, but usually, like some of the examples, there's some people that are designed to eat in direct light, or on the other side, indirect light, right? So like some people are only going to digest well if they're eating when the sun's up. Some people are only going to digest well if they eat after the sun's gone down.
No.
Some people have a determination, it's called determination, where they're designed to eat cold food. Now, those people, if they were breastfed from day one, they're being conditioned to not eat in alignment with their design, because breast milk is warm.
Right.
And some people are only designed to eat hot food, or like, so they're going to digest better if they have spicy foods. And, if they're not eating salads and smoothies, which so many people would say, oh, if you want to be healthy, you eat salads and you drink smoothies and you eat the raw food. But if you have a hot determination, that actually isn't going to digest well in your body, but your mind would try to convince you that that's what's healthy. So yeah, there's.
Okay. So when you're saying best place to live, are you talking about like the
environments are there's caves, there's shores, there's markets, there's mountains. Let's see, there's two more. Kitchens. Did I say kitchens? And valleys. Oh. Those are the environments. And then sometimes, sometimes it actually is that environment, or sometimes we can create that same energy of the environment, even if we don't specifically live in that environment. For example, like mountains. You can live where it's not on the mountain, but say you're in an apartment building, you'd want to be on the top floor where you can kind of look out from above and see what's down below. Or, caves, you'd maybe do better in the basement where it feels like it's a little bit darker and safer and more secure.
Oh, that's very interesting.
And like valleys, we can create a valley environment through like sometimes using headphones, kind of makes you feel like you're in your own personal valley, and it's very acoustic related. But yeah, so.
So how were you introduced into the human design?
She was introduced to human design. It was about 5 years ago. I was going to a business retreat to learn business retreat to learn how to create retreats in my own coaching business. So back then my plan was to create adventure retreats for moms. So I went to this retreat from this woman that was teaching coaches how to use retreats to create a 6-figure business. And so she introduced us to human design. And for me, it was so life-changing. And actually, especially as a projector, because it's so many times I look back on all the coaches I've worked with in the past, and I can see now that they were all either generators or manifesting generators, which 70% of the population fall into that category. And generators, they have that other motor that you don't have to find in yours, that sacral center. It's that life force energy. And they're designed to be the doers, they have that consistent access to that life force energy. And, and I can look back and see that all of these like coaching programs that I've tried and all these marketing strategies I've tried work really well for generators and manifesting generators, but do not work for projectors, because we're not here to be in that working, pushing, doing energy. And when we are forcing ourselves, which we can draw on that energy, right? So when we absorb energy from a white center, not only do we absorb it, but then we amplify it. So projectors can become kind of super slaves. We can just get where we don't know when to stop working, we overwork, we overpush, and then we get so exhausted and burnt out. Yeah, right. I'm really good at overworking and not knowing when to stop. And what's really interesting too is the more that I work, the harder it is for me to sleep. On the days when I work all day, and even if I enjoyed it and I felt like I was in the flow, I will lay down and I'll be really tired, but my brain won't shut off and I can't stop working, because projectors are not here to spend that much time working. It's out of alignment. And so it's going to take even longer to release that conditioned not self energy and to be able to rest. But so, yeah, she introduced me to human design, and just realizing that it wasn't that there was anything wrong with me. It's really easier as a projector to feel like you're just broken, right? Like everyone else around you has this consistent access and they do these things and it works out for them, and they draw people in and they build their business. And I do all of those things and I work twice as hard as them. And it's like crickets, like nobody notices and nobody cares. And so that's what it's like to be a projector. Projectors are not self-emotion, it's bitterness, where we care so deeply about people and we want to help people, and we understand people really quickly and really deeply, like just because the way our aura works, it's probing and penetrating. So we see really deeply into the other person really quickly. But it has to be invited, because energetically they can feel that our aura is going to probe into theirs. And if they didn't want us to see them at that deep level, their instant natural reflex will be to put up the walls. And even if what we're saying to that other person is exactly what they need to hear, it's going to lead to them, whatever their problem is, and working through it and having success on the other side, they will not hear it because it wasn't invited. But on the other side, when people do actually see us and the value we have to offer and how we can guide them and help them to have more success in their life, and they invite us in, then like that's just a magic connection that happens. And it feels really good to have that acknowledgement and that recognition and have that invitation from that place of being recognized. But yeah, so that's a little bit about how I learned. And it's so funny because this woman that introduced me, she's definitely a generator and she's an amazing coach. And she actually hired me after the retreat to work for her for a while. And, she talked about working in alignment with, who you are and being sourced and all of those things. And yet when she hired me, she expected me to work like a generator. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're the one that taught me about human design. I'm a projector, I have limited energy and I'm not supposed to be a doer, but yet you're almost forcing me to work harder than I ever have before. And I would show up and I would do support for her retreats, and she would go from 9 a.m. till 9 p.m. And then I'd have to be there an hour early to set up and an hour late to clean up. And then still, like, she wanted me to keep track of all of her emails and make sure all the customer service stuff was taken care of. And it would just wear me out. I was so exhausted and so burnt out. And it was just really interesting for me to realize that that's been my pattern, to overwork, to overgive, to over deliver, to like not let myself have that downtime and honor that I have limited energy. But so, yeah, so it's been definitely quite the learning experience. They also say human design, it takes 7 years to fully decondition. So 7 years from when you start following your strategy and authority. So for projectors to wait to be invited, and then for you, like that emotional authority and learning to ride out that emotional wave before you say yes. And then, it's 7 years. Hopefully, they say it becomes easier to actually live in alignment. There is a noticeable difference that happens at 3.5 years. And it really has a lot to do with, it takes 7 years for the cells in your body to regenerate. So until that happens, you still have that cell memory, that muscle memory in your conditioned response to things, in that not self, in all of the pressure you take from other people. And so at 3.5, now you start to have more cells that are in alignment than not in alignment. And then at 7 years, hopefully we're all fully aligned and life just becomes easy and successful.
So how would one go about to create that alignment? I mean, so you learn what your design is.
Mm-hmm.
So are there steps then that you take to become aligned?
It's interesting because the truth is that so our mind, that place of okay, what are the steps and how do I do it? That is so much from our mind conditioning and our not self. And really it comes when we start to trust and surrender and know that we don't have to figure out the steps or do it right. And when we just stop trying to do all the right things and find the right path, and we just let the invitations come to us, and we let our body tell us what to say yes to and what to say no to, whether it feels logical or correct or reasonable or not. And so it really comes to making that conscious choice in each day as you wake up to remember my strategy, remember my authority, and do my best to turn the volume of the mind off. And that part of me that wants to know all the steps and know what it's going to look like on the other side, and really surrender, trusting that the right things are going to come to you at the right time. Especially for projectors, it's more not doing than doing.
Oh, that's too hard.
It's so hard. Our mind is like, no, I can't do less. If I do less, that's not going to bring more success. I need to do more.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, because really, my whole path and journey as a coach really started when I lost my mom back in 2010. Completely unexpectedly. I was actually pregnant with my second son at the time. I was 4 months pregnant, and she was diabetic, and not necessarily not what you picture as a really healthy person, but none of us realized that she was so sick that she was about to die. And, she collapsed on her first day of summer vacation. She was a kindergarten teacher, and she spent 2 weeks unconscious in a coma in the hospital before her body just shut down. Mm-hmm. And the hardest part for me, she was a projector as well. The hardest part for me was realizing that she'd never actually learned to be happy. She spent her whole life sacrificing everything as a mom. I have 4 siblings, so 5 kids and a wife and a teacher. And, and the truth is she didn't really know who she was, and she died feeling like she wasn't enough. And I realized that I was kind of on that same path of feeling like I needed to sacrifice everything as a mom. And, and I took it really hard. Being pregnant, when you lose a parent, losing a parent, I don't think any of us are ever ready to lose a parent. I don't care how old you are. I don't care how old your parent is, whether they have a long illness or not, we're never really ready for that moment to lose a parent. Mm-hmm. But being pregnant and so if I hadn't been pregnant, I probably would have had some really unhealthy ways of coping with that grief that were not available to me because I was pregnant. So I really pulled back. I stopped working. I took lots of naps. I listened to motivational things because I was here, I'm growing this baby. And I knew energy wise, right? The environment I'm creating in my body, he's absorbing. So I want to do everything I can so that he's not just growing in this immense energy of grief. Mm-hmm. So what can I do? So that's what I did. And I've never worked less in my entire life than during that time. And it's funny because, I always had a full-time job and I always had a side thing, right? I would spend all my time working, day job, side gig, whether that was a network marketing company or my coaching thing or whatever. And that year that I worked less than any other year of my life, I was pregnant. I was really like sick with the pregnancy. My mom died. I stopped working. I took lots of naps. That was actually the first year of my life I ever made six figures.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't because I was intentionally trying to live in alignment with my design, but out of necessity, I did, right? I stopped working. I just surrendered. I just did whatever I could do in the moment to feel as good as possible. And that's actually when the money came. Because when, especially as projectors, when we're in that work push energy, we're actually resisting the success that we desire. We're keeping it out. The invitations can't come when we're in the energy that's not aligned with who we are. So yeah. And the mind, like I said, the mind's like that politician. It wants to do or say whatever it can do or say to stay in power and make the decisions. And so, yeah, the mind's going to be like, oh, no, you can't do that. That's too hard.
Yeah.
I get it. I've been there. And I have to still constantly remind myself that like, oh, wait, I'm in that push energy again. I'm working too hard and I'm trying to do all the things and I think I have to do it all. And it's every single time that I catch myself in that energy and I pull back and I remember, oh, nope, I need to rest. I need to just wait till the invitation comes. I don't have to like strategize and plan it all out. That's actually when the big invitations come and when the acknowledgement comes. It doesn't come from overworking, even though my mind thinks it will. Yeah.
Well, that's overwhelming.
And that's the thing that I said, like 3.5 years of like just letting yourself feel into it. It becomes so much easier. And I used to have like this constant negative voice in my head telling me all the reasons why I wasn't enough, what I was doing wasn't enough. And really that is the biggest difference I noticed after 3.5. That voice is almost never there now. And it's so freeing to not have that voice always tearing me down in my life. It really is.
Great.
Yeah.
So what does a relationship with a client look like with you?
Yeah. So we tend to, we have created the movement that we call surrender story, because really that's what it is. It's surrendering to your natural design. And, we tend to start with like a human design intro session, which is usually between 60 and 90 minutes. But really this work, because our mind is so strong, this work really does work best when it's in a more extended package, a more extended program. So we have what we call the surrender journey that starts at 3 months. And we also have retreats that we do, surrender retreats. The last one we just did in Steamboat Springs, Colorado. It was amazing. We went to the hot springs and we've got another one that's coming up in September. We're still working out the details of where that's going to be. But yeah, and when we kind of do this in a more in-depth, out of the energy of, all the responsibilities and routines and families and all the things going on. And we really dive into understanding your chart. And then from there, kind of create that container so that you don't just default back into the old energy. Because really, it is kind of like we're in the fishbowl. Our conditioning, our not self, is that it's the water we've been swimming in our whole lives. It's really hard to see. Like the fish can't see the water. The fish doesn't notice the water. Yeah. And that's the same thing that happens with our conditioning that we've taken on through our white centers. And so when we go back into our daily routines and responsibilities and all of our home life, it's really easy to default back. So having that support to kind of remind you, wait, all I need to do is follow my strategy and authority and, really surrender to my design can be really helpful. But yeah. And then, so we do have a free offer too, if anyone is interested, if you want to see your chart. It's called the Human Design Alignment Map, and it's free. And it's not like an automated thing. I actually do create the chart and I pull out the pieces that are important that will help you to start with your strategy and authority. And also it brings in whether your centers are white or whether they're colored, what the healthy versus unhealthy expression of each of those centers in, which can be really helpful too. So it can help you to identify when it is that external pressure, that water that you're not really aware of, when that's motivating you and making you feel like, oh, of course they have to like post on Facebook every day, or of course they have to send that weekly email, or whatever that is for you. But yeah, so it's a human design alignment map. It does take me a little bit of time to create it. So I usually return that within 48 hours. And like I said, it's not just an automated thing. I really will pull your specific chart, but we do that for free just to help people get started. So, and then they can decide if they want to go deeper.
Great. All right. So we'll put a link below for people to get that additional information.
Perfect.
So any closing thoughts?
One thing that I always like to kind of leave with is that your human design, like your design, the way that you're designed, the ones that are white in your chart and the ones that are colored, it's intentional, it's on purpose. And really, you have your design just the way it is so that you can live out the life purpose that you're here to live out. And so really, the main goal of human design is to help you to see what makes you unique and different, and to really honor and appreciate all of those parts, even the parts that you spent your whole life thinking were wrong or broken or needed to be fixed. Mm-hmm. And that, who we are is absolutely perfect.
Great. All right. Melissa, thank you so much. That was just, I'm very, very intrigued with all that information. It's a lot to absorb.
It is a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share it with you today. It's been an honor to get to know you a little bit, especially through your chart. And
yeah, you know more about me than I do. So, all right, Giant Builders, thank you very much. We'll see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening. This has been The Giant Builders with Lois Wyant.